Live from the Sigmund-ri room of Rosie's Bar in beautiful downtown Uijeongbu, South Korea, this is the Best Care Anywhere podcast. And with that, that is the entirety of the script I have for this episode. So from here on out, I don't know what's going to happen. I am your host, Anthony, here with my friends. What am I calling you, by the way? Please introduce yourselves with whatever you wish to be known as. What do you guys wish to be called?
Go ahead, Jaski.
All right, apparently we're calling him Jaski. He doesn't get to choose.
Sorry, hello, yes. My mother knocked on the door.
Oh, your mother has the worst timing. I love it.
She does, but also it's me, Mum, and technically she's also my landlord, so she takes priority.
I would not have wanted this to start any other way. So I was asking you guys, what do you wish to be called on this podcast? Because I know that's a thing in the internet space. And Wilson, see, I'll just call you Wilson now. You don't get to choose now. How does that make you feel? Wilson just straight up called you Jaski. So now you guys are just Wilson and Jaski for the next 10 years of this podcast. That is what you called. You can't change it. Go screw all yourselves. That's what we're doing.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm your host, Anthony, and with that tremulous introduction, welcome to the Best Care Anywhere podcast. Before we go any further, obviously, if you're here because of MASH, but we'll get to that in a minute. It might do us well to at least introduce ourselves and kind of how we know each other and stuff like that. So I'm Anthony. We'll get to me later. Who wants to go next?
Well, I guess I will. Yes. So I'm Jaski. I think I first met you through the Order of the Arrow at Camp Ree, it would have been.
Yes. So long story short, we are all Boy Scouts, or we're Boy Scouts in some capacity. We all worked at the same summer camp, so that's kind of how we came to know each other. So the origin story of our friendship is very interesting.
It's intertwined with scouting in America.
Yes.
For better or
I think
worse.
the first of the two of you I met was Wilson.
I believe that to be true.
Probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wilson joined the Order of the Arrow. We hosted a camporee where a bunch of Boy Scout troops come together in camp. And I had already worked, I think, 2 years at summer camp. I worked in 2015 and then 2016. Yeah. Wilson, when were you in the kitchen?
My first year was 2016 as the kitchen boy.
So in spring of 2017 then was the camporee where we all three were in the same place, because you dragged a very intimidated and nervous looking Jared up to me like, this is the guy that's going to come work in nature this summer. And I'm like, he looks thrilled. he looks not terrified at all.
Well, as you two both know, and our viewers will come to learn, I may be 21 now, but up until, well, I guess the age of 16, I acted like I was 9, and still now I act like I'm 12. So, intimidated and nervous best describe those that I determined to be my friends around that time.
Oh, God. So, yeah, and then we ended up working, well, me a total of, well, not counting 2020 because coronavirus, but, so 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 21, so 6 years. 6 years at a Boy Scout camp, and then Wilson was there for 5 of those years, and then Jaski, you were there for like 3 or 4 of those years. I know there was a year that was like funky where you were going to come, but then you couldn't. And
I worked in 2017 and 19 and 21, and I was there for the beginning and end of 2018.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, so we all know each other through scouting. And that's kind of informed the ridiculousness that is our friendship. But that also has kind of led to us, God, I think as early as like 2017, I wanted to do some sort of podcast, whether it was with you guys or camp related or something like that. And
first time, you brought it up was up in Colfax late one night. We were all just gathered around a table, just hanging out, around 10 p.m. one Saturday evening. And we're like, it'd be cool. Podcast.
And I think the initial idea was to tell like camp stories, and then I think very quickly that turned into way too big of a project because one, we have a lot of camp stories.
Oh yes.
But not enough for a long-term podcast, and two, and if you were part of this discussion, I'm going to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain. There were way too many goddamn people involved. I I did not understand how complicated starting a podcast was, and by the time I realized I had way too many people giving their opinions on what it should be, I'm like, yeah, we're gonna try this again later.
Well, and that's just
that's
what
not. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, that's just what the world needs. Three, another three guys sitting around on a podcast talking about nothing in particular.
No, this. It got to the point where it's like the entire like staff lounge server was gonna be on this podcast.
Yeah,
So,
it was
yeah.
it was too much. It was never gonna work.
Oh,
Yeah.
I hear the Union Pacific Railroad. God bless.
Oh,
And
that's right.
no.
It's oh, there it is. I'm just for context. I'm about a mile away from the tracks, and there's like a couple small hills in between me and the tracks. So I am and a forest. I am not close to the train at all. It just echoes down to me because I'm down in
this will be a running theme because there's another podcast that I help manage and produce and occasionally appear on that also is like 100 yards from the railroad tracks where it records. So trains in the background are just going to be a running theme for me apparently, but it's whatever.
Beautiful.
So yeah, so that got shot down because there were just too many people involved. And then because we worked at camp, and this is kind of where this podcast idea started, is when you work at a scout camp, you're 2 months there at camp, 8 months off season, and then you get ready to come back to camp again in the spring. And during that like 2 months where you're starting to like pull all your gear out and get on emails and phone calls and Zoom meetings about, putting together the staff and all that, depending on whether it's your first year or you're like a management person, you start like, I think everyone has like weird little traditions they have for getting ready for camp. Mine were always one or a combination of these three things. I would listen to Gary Paulson's Hatchet series on audiobook. That was just one where it kind of gets you in the camp mood. I would listen to songs and music that I had that kind of reminded me of camp. And the other one, which I know these two have heard me say multiple times, is I will watch MASH because, and these guys have heard me say it 100 times, Matt, and I've recommended it to other people who've worked on staff. It's like, if you are missing like the summer camp feeling of ridiculousness, but also interpersonal drama that happens when you're working on camp staff, watch MASH because it's weirdly relatable if you've worked in that kind of environment. Even though summer camp isn't military, there's just like something about a group of people that live and work together so long that relates so much to a group of people that live and work together for 2 months straight that I find it incredibly enjoyable to do that before going to camp.
Yeah, there's enough parallels that you can in some ways empathize significantly with the characters of just like shared experiences, pretty much, of like, oh, I've also experienced these problems. It's comforting in a way. They're like, oh, hi, I've done that too. There's something neat about it.
Well, and after a couple of years removed from it, I think we can all attest, or at least a couple of years removed for some of us, the nostalgia trip is going to be needed in a way and unwelcome in others.
Oh yeah. So that got me, since about halfway through working through my career at this summer camp, I'm like, I want to do a MASH podcast. Like I think we've talked about 4 or 5 times in different circles of people on a Twitch stream or in a Discord call talking about, like, I really want to do a podcast. And it always circles back to the one I want to do that I was always afraid would not have enough interest is the MASH one. So I finally just said, screw it. I need to find people who would be willing to watch MASH. And that's where you two came in. So, because I'm, of the three of us, I am the nerd. I am the one that has seen every episode. Oh God, I would say at least 5 or 6 times, because I've watched through the series at least that many times. There are some I've seen many more than that. And there are some that don't immediately come to mind, or I see them again and go, oh yeah, that episode exists, that I forget about. But you two are an unknown to me, because I know I've mentioned MASH to you, and I know that you guys know what MASH is, but I before we go any further, I kind of want to know, like, right now, no further context. I think I specifically said don't look anything up for this episode, don't do any research for this episode. Right now, before we go into season 1, episode 1 next week, or 2 weeks from now when the next episode comes out, what is individually what is MASH to you? What do you know about it? When you hear me say the word MASH, what immediately pops into your mind? What do you know? What do you not know? What confuses you? Describe to me in 10 sentences or less, what is MASH based on your current understanding? Not literally, just what when I said we're doing a MASH podcast, like what is your knowledge of MASH as of this moment before we go watch anything or discuss anything else?
Well, my father likes MASH, probably because it was a show that he watched when he was growing up. So we have the first, I don't even know, 3-4 seasons on DVD. So I've seen those. I don't know if I've seen every episode, but I've watched, I'd say a majority of the first 3 or 4 seasons a few times throughout high school. But I haven't really seen any of them recently because, well, once I moved out, I wasn't watching anything on DVD since we didn't have a DVD player. So I have seen a good amount of MASH from the beginning of the show, but it's been a couple of years.
Wilson, what about you? What is your current understanding of the multiverse of MASH, the MASHverse, if you will?
For me, it was just the reruns that were playing in the smoky bar rooms or the garages that I would get dragged to as a kid. You know, it was just it was kind of constantly playing in one way or another. And as a child, I sort of treated it kind of like Saturday morning cartoons. If it was on, heck yeah. But I mean, that was years ago. I'm quite a bit removed from that now, and more than anything, I consider myself a bit of a history buff, and I'm not saying I'm watching MASH for its historical accuracy, but I am saying I'm very interested to see a part of that culture, you know, portraying the Korean War in the 50s, but produced in the 70s.
Yeah, for me, I might as well give mine. Kind of the same with you, Jaski. It was my dad would have it on reruns. It wasn't his he wouldn't religiously watch it, but if it was on and nothing good else was on, he would pick up on it and watch it. Yeah. And then I'd say probably about the time I was 10 was when I would seek it out and watch it, because at that point I'm a history nerd, specifically for World War II. All the army men in their fatigues caught my eye. And growing up, I was described as oh God, what's the term? I can't think of it now. An old soul, which is adult speak for weird kid. I wouldn't say I was mature. I'm not a Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory. I'm not so removed from my age group of people that I can't interact with them. But I was also once described by a first grade field trip chaperone as like a little old man who just sat there and would talk to you. I could connect with adults and kids my own age pretty well. And because of that, MASH was also a show that I understood most of the jokes. Not like the adult, sex-related ones, but when Hawkeye walks up to a building and does a fake incantation and Frank Burns walks out and he goes, "My God, it worked." That, I understood the joke and I thought it was fucking hilarious. So not only did MASH scratch the ooh, Army Men World War II history itch that 10-year-old me thought he needed to have filled, but it also very much informed my comedy, my sense of humor. I would say Robin Williams, my dad being loud, obnoxious, and a storyteller, and MASH, specifically Alan Alda's Hawkeye, it formed kind of what I find funny, and also, we'll get into this with some episodes, kind of my moral standing on some things, kind of how I approach oh, that person's being an asshole, but they're being an asshole in a low-key way, and I'm not going to bother with it. Oh, now they're being a high-key asshole, now I'm going to get involved. And that's something that we'll see going into the show more in depth, but yeah, but I very quickly realized that, oh, this is a show that nobody my age watches. So that's kind of always been the bummer, is because us three have talked at length about all sorts of movies and TV shows. Like there have been Discord calls where I know we've been up with like some of our camp friends like for 4 or 5 hours straight, just talking randomly through this movie got released, or what do we think about this movie from 20 years ago, or this TV show that just got released on Disney Plus. How do we feel about it? You know, but I've never been able to do that with MASH because I'm the only weirdo my age that watches it.
Yeah, I mean
So,
it's not really that popular anymore, and I just feel like it's not
which
getting a lot of exposure for younger people because, well,
which which is I'm hoping kind of what this podcast knew, because I know there's a lot just based on poking around on Facebook and the internet in general the last couple weeks preparing for this. There's a lot of people, my dad's generation, my grandparents' generation, that still very much love the show and rewatch it. And heck, even just this past weekend, I think Jamie Farr and Loretta Swit, two of the leads from the show, Corporal Klinger and Major Houlihan, they were at Indiana Comic Con. Like they're still very much known, but it's not. I want to kind of introduce it to our generation because, and I only kind of appreciated this in the last couple years, getting older and being able to kind of understand more of the serious topics of the show from an adult point of view, and also learning kind of the history of how the show got made and how they tackled certain things. I am firmly convinced, and I'll say this multiple times throughout this podcast, I don't think we have some of the TV shows we have today without MASH having existed. And I'll go into depth on that in a little bit here, but MASH was incredibly poignant at the time it was made. So
it was a pretty big deal, from what I understand.
So I have some notes here. 'Cause the purpose of this episode was not just to introduce us and how we know MASH, but I also kind of want to lay for anyone who is joining us that is maybe our age or even of any age who hasn't, maybe kind of has like a background knowledge of like, yeah, MASH is a show that exists. I have some notes here of kind of how MASH came to be, so we kind of go into season 1 all on the same page. But before I do that, before I give you any information, something I want to do each episode is ask the three of us, but also put it out to the audience to rate whatever episode we're discussing on a scale of 0 to 5. Preferably not 0, because I actually want to keep record of this and tally it and kind of see, kind of graph it out and see what episodes people like and what episodes people don't. Because I like MASH. I will watch any episode of MASH, even the ones that I find kind of boring and not great. I would still probably give a 3, I think, because I just like the show. But another thing I discovered is there is very much some clear-cut lines in the MASH community of there's people that only like the first 4 seasons because they're funnier. There's people that only like the last 6 seasons because they're a little more serious and adult. There's people that love the original cast and hate, they do have a kind of a big cast change halfway through the show. And some people, we lost Jaski.
Ooh,
Oh no.
we can edit this out, right?
Nope, we're not going to edit a damn thing. Welcome back,
Haha.
Dishy.
Okay,
Did I not?
Dishy just had a bit of a seizure, but we're
that
here.
beautiful
We're
beautiful
fine.
Elon Musk internet.
God, the rectangle's angry at me again.
But long story short, I'm interested to see kind of what our eventual audience and what we feel about the different episodes, and kind of see where those peaks and valleys are in our ratings. So on that note, before I give you any further information on MASH, if based on your knowledge of the series right now, on a scale of 0.1, it is a garbage TV show, should not exist, to a scale of 5, it is, even with the limited amount of media you've seen of it, it is the best show you can think of ever existing for the rest of time. Personally, for you guys, where would you sit on what you think of MASH right now? Just from the little bit you guys know, is it a 2, it exists, but not for me? Is it a 4? Yeah, what I've seen is really good, but that's really all I know. What would be your out of 5 rating for MASH as you know it right now?
Well, not to throw in decimal places, but that's what you're going to get, Buckaroo.
That's okay.
I'm going to list it as a solid 3.5. Not because I find anything distasteful about it. I've always liked what I've seen, but a lot of it I saw when I wasn't old enough to truly appreciate what it was. And of course, I've watched several episodes as I've grown older. It's been around for, more or less my life, in some form or another. And something you brought up that I'm really glad you did is I've seen some parallels in even modern TV shows between original MASH gags and storylines that are still, very much alive and well today. So I think it's very influential. But as of right now, as of starting this podcast, it doesn't hold a huge grip on my life. So
Hmm.
that's why I think a solid 3.5. It's influential. It's there. I'm excited, but I don't know enough about it to give it a firm better score.
Hmm.
Excellent. Jaski, how about
Interesting.
you?
I'm gonna go off and give MASH a 4 out of 5. Um, and granted, I probably have a higher opinion of the show just through the lens of nostalgia. I know I haven't seen it recently, but what I do remember, I remember enjoying quite a bit. And just thinking this is, an entertaining show. I enjoy watching it. It's one of the few things that I actually dedicated hard drive space to. So it has enough value that uh, I consider it to be, up there. Definitely a top 10 favorite TV shows easily.
Jaski, if Jaski dedicates hard drive space to you, that is high praise.
That is quite literally the highest award I can give to any piece of media.
Well, let's hold on there. He dedicated hard drive space to Cyberpunk 2077 when it, first.
Not anymore. Those privileges can be revoked.
Ah,
I'm obviously I'm going to be biased. MASH is easily in my top 3 TV shows of all time. I wouldn't. It's hard to say it's number 1 because my top 3 are my top 3 for vastly different reasons.
Yeah.
For reference, there's a very similar thing with all my top 3 that I'll share real quick. MASH, Star Wars The Clone Wars, the animated series, and Avatar The Last Airbender are my top 3 favorite TV shows. Not necessarily favorite because like other shows have come where I'm like, move aside you 3, I need to watch this show right now. But long running for what they are, and each of them has a different reason it's in my top 3, those are them. But the one common thing with all 3 of them is I always tell people there is a specific number of episodes you have to push through to get to the episode that convinces you to keep watching the show. And for Avatar: The Last Airbender, I think it's the Southern Air Temple one where they find out that his whole people are dead. And if you don't know what the shows I'm talking about, that's fine. You should go watch them, regardless of what age you are, because all 3 of these shows are amazing. And then Star Wars, it's just the ones where it stops being for little kids. So like season 2. And for MASH, I know you guys have heard me say this. We're going to get to an episode in season 1 called Sometimes You Hear the Bullet. That is the episode I tell people that you need to get to that episode of MASH for you to understand what they are going to try to do for the rest of the show. But for me, MASH has its issues, and we will talk about them. I am not so blinded by my love of it that it is a 5 out of 5 for me, but I'm giving it a solid 4.8 out of 5. And who knows, I'm actually expecting that number to maybe go down over the course of this podcast. Because I want to ask, because even in the last few months, about 2 months ago, I started watching through the series again to prep for this. And I found myself stopping and going like, ooh, I forgot that joke was a thing. And ooh, I forgot this character's this big of an asshole in this situation. And in some ways, it's made me like the show more, but in other ways, I've gone, ooh, this episode wasn't as good as I remembered it. So it'll be interesting to see if by the end of our watch through, how our 3 initial numbers change. But anyway, enough with ratings and talking about things that aren't MASH. Let's talk about MASH real quick. Just to give you guys some background, because even in the research, I didn't know some of this stuff, and if I didn't know it, that is shocking. So, a couple things about MASH just to get us primed for watching the pilot episode. Did you guys know that MASH started out as a book?
As a book? No. I didn't realize it started as a book. I was familiar that there was a movie that started out as the first, televised form of it that was later then transferred into a TV show, which some characters transferred over, some did not. But I did not know there was a book.
Okay, you have more than a more than a layman's level knowledge of MASH then if you know that it started as a movie and some of the movie characters transferred over. But no, it actually started as a book called MASH, a novel about 3 army doctors by Dr. Richard Hornberger, who went by the pen name Richard Hooker. It was published in 1968, and it was kind of like it was a fictional account of his time at the 8055th MASH in Korea. So it's like the characters are fake, but it's based off real. It's
Real
not
stuff.
complete fiction. Like he was there, he was in Korea, he was a doctor, but he kind of rearranged everything, made new characters, and wrote a fictional story. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how much input or influence did the good
hang
doctor
on.
have on the show?
Hold on, we're gonna get there. It's a whole saga, and we're at the very beginning of it.
Oh boy.
So the book was rejected several times by publishers because of its war and blood and surgery and not a super common thing. But William Morrow Publishers eventually picked it up. The book was reasonably popular. He went on to write 2 sequels. He also went on to be specialized in thoracic surgery in Bremen, Maine, so he was a practicing surgeon at the time. He loved the film that later got made from his movie, but he disliked the series. He did not like some of the direction the series went, and he especially did not like Alan Alda's portrayal of Hawkeye, who is mostly based off of Hornberger himself. So the author of the original book was not a huge fan of the series. He got royalties because the series was based off his original property, but he was never a fan of the series. So that is interesting.
I'm upset, but my pockets are full.
Yeah, I'm upset, but I have money. The book was popular enough that director Robert Altman and oh gosh, I didn't write down what studio produced the movie, and that's really bad of me. I want to say, was it Fox that produced it? I don't remember.
Yeah,
bad
probably.
timing on my part. MASH the movie was released in 1970, directed by Robert Altman, was based on Hornberger's book. The screenplay was written by Ingo Preminger. And I need to go back and watch. Again, I've seen the MASH movie. It did not hold my interest when I saw it for the first time. I think I saw it for the first time, like, it was on in the background while I was doing something when I was, like, 13 or 14, and it just didn't, like, I understood that it was MASH, and I understood that it was the movie that the series was based off of, but it did not capture my interest as much as the show did. But looking at the cast list for this movie, I might need to go back and watch this just for the cast list. I think I did this a couple weeks ago with A Bridge Too Far, because I saw the cast list for it. And it's like, I've never watched this movie, but I need to watch this movie just based on who's in it. Donald Sutherland, Robert Duvall, Renee Auberjonois, which is, if you've seen Star Trek Deep Space Nine, that's Otto, the shapeshifter, the security guard. Fred Williamson and Gary Berghoff. So,
oh, you forgot one.
Who?
Sylvester Stallone was an extra.
Okay, I was gonna mention he was an
God.
extra. He wasn't a title character. I was gonna bring that up eventually, but technically, yes, Sylvester Stallone was in the MASH movie.
Wow.
Yeah, that is quite the cast of people, and those are just the main ones I noticed. There's a whole bunch of other little like ones snuck in there. Like one of them is, and we're gonna eventually have to do a bonus episode where we watch the movie. Probably after we watch through season 1, just so we can kind of compare and contrast. But yeah, the movie, I didn't realize that many like key actors were in that film. So yeah, that kind of shocked me. And yes, Sylvester Stallone is the one that made me go, wait, what? The film was released in 1970 at the height of the anti-Vietnam sentiment. So it came out at it's very much a product of its time. It's very anti-establishment is it's very much framed in that viewpoint. Even though it's about Korea, it's very much framed in the anti-war, anti-establishment movement that was starting up in the 70s. And it is, if you think about 1970, if you think about the movies that came out in the 70s, so you like Jaws, The Godfather, a whole bunch of other blockbusters, this was basically the first quote unquote blockbuster for the 1970s. It was 36 million at the box office and viewed by 14 million people in its first few months. So yeah, it very much struck a chord at the time it was released. And continuing the theme, director Robert Altman did not like the TV series either. Which
wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's and we'll talk about Altman and Hornberger's dislike of the series more. I'm sure that'll come up in episodes, but we'll also talk about it when we do the bonus episode for the movie. But I find it so interesting that they were just vehemently opposed to the series, and I would argue the series is the most known version of this, the most known thing under the MASH title, and yeah, it ran for 11 years as opposed to the movie coming out once and the books getting written once. But I find that just so weird that these two people did not like the series, and yet the series was kind of the powerhouse of the three of them. But yeah, that is mind-boggling to me. And then last little thing I want to talk about how the series got made or got started. William Self, the president of 20th Century Fox, saw the movie and is like, this needs to be a TV show. Someone needs to hop on that right now. For some reason, not a whole lot of people were on board with the idea of making it a TV series. They thought it was kind of a gimmick of pairing two things that were common in TV at the time. You had army and military related shows, like you had Hogan's Heroes, McHale's Navy, and a couple other ones that were like comedies in the workplace comedies, but set in the military. And you had ones that were pseudo sitcoms based around a main character that was a doctor or set in a hospital or something like that. And they weren't dramas either. They weren't like, they weren't like ER or anything like that. They were just kind of simple family sitcoms that happened to take place around a hospital or happened to involve a doctor that was the head of the family or something like that.
My lord, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yep. Also, based on the movie, no one really understood how you were going to be able to make a made-for-TV sitcom, essentially, based on nudity, profanity, blood, and sex. So, again, this was the 70s. Nowadays, it's like, but Game of Thrones. Like...
But Game of Thrones.
But Game of Thrones. Isn't that like the tagline for Game of Thrones?
Well, I'm not going to sit down
a song of nudity and profanity, or whatever the hell the book.
Down with my grandmother and watch Game of Thrones. I would watch MASH with her, but
you won't watch Game of Thrones. Why? There's so many clean, wholesome family scenes.
Yeah, the scenes with family wholesomeness are the ones I'm worried about.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Moving right along.
Oh boy.
So eventually they convinced ABC and CBS to show some interest. CBS committed before the pilot was even written. They took a risk, and oh boy, did it pay off. They hired Gene Reynolds and Larry Gelbart as producer-writers. Burt Metcalf, these are people we're going to talk about in the future as we get into the series, because they are the three of them, depending on what era of MASH you're watching, very much determined what vibe the show gave off, for lack of a better term. The pilot would air in the fall of 1972, so we're coming up. This is the 50th anniversary of MASH coming up, so yeah. I didn't plan this at all. Completely unfazed, but it also took my mind to the fact that, do you know what else came out 50 years ago this year?
The Godfather?
No.
The Godfather, yeah. Oh. And I never thought of those two things happening at the same time. And I think that's because you fall into the trap of, because MASH takes place in Korea, you think of it as... But yeah, the Godfather movie and MASH season 1 happened in the same point in history, and that kind of hurts my brain a little bit. But that also means Robert Duvall went from playing Frank Burns in the movie to Tom Hagen in the course of 6 months, which also hurts my brain, and I don't want to think about it.
Robert Duvall is a national treasure.
He is, honestly. I love him so much. He's one of my favorite actors, just period.
Absolutely.
So the pilot episode literally called pilot. It didn't really have a name, I don't think. Would air in the fall to kind of meh reactions. Like, this is a common theme. The author hated it, the director hated it, the people of America kind of hated it. Oh, God. Oh, hang on. Breathe. Dishy. Jaski,
I'm
are you
waiting for
there?
Discord to become green. Okay, Discord says I'm green again. Are we back?
We're back. You're here. So yeah,
Oh,
the joys of us not being close enough to record in person, which is only going to get worse because one of us has to go to Kansas for some reason.
Yeah, curse higher education. Am I right, guys? What did it ever do for society?
Colleges are awful, and you should never work at one.
I actually agree with that wholeheartedly, but
anyway. So yeah, the pilot got released in 72. Meh reactions. It was ranked 46 out of 84 in its first season. So it was a solid
average.
It was a solid C's get degrees of TV shows, apparently. It initially had 13 shows in the first season. So it was a small first season for that time. They got approved for 9 more episodes to get released for the first season. And then they were asked for a further 2 after that. So it ended up being a full 24 episode season, which was typical for the time. So that showed kind of promise. It's like, okay, America doesn't like it, but the people paying us to make it kind of like it. Then after the first season, it got shown on reruns because typically it's weird to think about now with streaming and how shows and movies get released now, but it was very much more regimented back in the day where new shows dropped in the fall. You would watch them over the winter, and then they would rerun in the spring and summer, and then season 2 would drop in the fall, and it would, up until recently, that was the case, and then streaming kind of broke all that. But apparently everyone had watched enough of the primetime TV shows when they were airing in the fall that a lot of people watched the reruns of MASH, and the ratings actually started to go up during the reruns. And there is a rumor that the head of CBS Studios was convinced to take the show on for a second season by his wife. There's an interview with Jamie Farr where he essentially says that the rumor was that some pillow talk between the head of CBS and his wife convinced him to let MASH run for a second season. And the first season, Jamie Farr said they were going up against the Wonderful World of Disney. That they had the same time slot. So yeah, if you're going to choose brand new Army Doctor show or Walt Disney himself, well, I think Disney was dead by that time, but still, most people were going to watch Wonderful World of Disney. And then for the second season, they put them right in between All in the Family, which was one of the biggest TV show sitcoms at the time, and right before the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was one of the big variety shows at the time. So they literally, according to Larry Linville, the actor who played Dr. Frank Burns, and I use the term doctor because it always gets a laugh. Thank you.
I don't believe in pity laughs.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. According to Larry Linville, they handed him 35 million people on a silver platter because people went from All in the Family to the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and they just stayed and watched MASH in between, and that shot them huge in the ratings. And from there, there was no stopping it, essentially, is what happened after that. Do you guys know how many seasons MASH would ultimately run for?
10?
I want to say 11.
11 seasons.
Sheesh.
Wow. 11 seasons, and I'll throw out, in my notes here, it just says, read these pages from this book, and I'm not going to read them, but I'm going to quickly glance through and give you some of the highlights, because we're now to the part where if I give you all the details now, then why are we doing this podcast? But essentially, would run for 251 episodes with roughly 750 individual storylines. It would become so venerated because medically they had a doctor on staff that would help them make sure they didn't flub any of the doctor stuff, any of the surgical stuff. And I think they say in the entire run of the show, there's only a few small details, medical-wise, that slip through. There's only one joke, allegedly, that got reused twice. There are some more errors when it comes to like military stuff, but military was more of a setting. They weren't out there making a historical documentary or anything like that. And over the course of the 11 seasons, they would be nominated for nearly 100 different awards for various episodes. So the show that the author, the director, and half of America hated in its first season ended up being one of, if not the greatest American television shows ever made. So I am curious to see us go through episode by episode and kind of experience that.
Yeah.
So now that you guys have a bit more backstory that maybe you did or did not know, what are your thoughts going from here? Are you more intrigued, less intrigued, about the same? What are we?
I'm intrigued to see how the show will change as it progresses. Because I mean, I think I've got a pretty good handle on kind of the feeling of the show at the beginning, but I'm curious to see if that'll change at all as the series progresses.
Well, I'm going to parrot what Jaski says here. I mean, one of the great things about watching any show is just watching it find its legs. You know, seeing what works, what doesn't, watching characters change and become the icons that you know them as. And with any new show, I'm looking forward to that, but especially one from 50 years ago now. I'm very interested to see how much carries what is no longer in vogue and what still is. It's just going to be one heck of a ride, and there is no one I'd rather do it with than you two.
Oh, thank you,
babe.
Yeah, and for those out there who are younger and who are like, "Ooh, a show from 50 years ago," I will say this: for its time, MASH was incredibly progressive. But at the same time, I am totally okay with being critical of something I love, and that we are going to have episodes where I can already think of 2 or 3 where I'm going to be like, "Hey, the first season of this show, I think it's episode 4, we're going to have a guest on, and it's going to be a really interesting discussion of here's how to not portray Korean people." But vice versa, toward the later seasons, we're going to have some episodes that I think do, for the time, an incredible job of being like, nope, this is a real thing that's happening in the world, and we're going to show it to you live on your TV, or not live on your TV screen, but we're going to address it in your living room on your TV screen and kind of make you think about it, which MASH was one of the first shows that kind of brought some of those subjects to the forefront very blatantly and without pulling its punches. So I am very intrigued to talk about it. For the audience listening, if you've made it this far, thank you. A couple things I'll mention right here at the end of the show. If you're listening to this and you're like, I want to follow along, I want to watch MASH along, I want to follow along with the podcast, I want to keep up with you guys, but you don't have access to MASH, because it's going to be very hard to pray that TV Land airs the right episodes at the right time. We did a little bit of research for you and found where you can pick up the episodes. Amazon, YouTube, and Hulu. MASH is currently all 11 seasons plus the movie are on. Amazon and YouTube is about $2 per episode or $20 per season. That's actually not a bad deal. Hulu is Hulu subscription, so have fun with that. You can also pick up the series on DVD, and I know people are going to ask. I'm going off the DVD copy, because the full, because if you watch it on TV, some of the episodes get cut down a little bit. Like some scenes are missing in the actual broadcast version because time. So if you get the DVD version, I don't know if YouTube, Hulu, and Amazon have the edited versions or the full versions. So
yeah, I don't know.
Good luck with that. I'm assuming it's probably the full versions. If your episodes are more than 28, or not 28, like more than 20 minutes, it's probably the full versions. If you are not interested in spending your money, understandable. If there are, we here at Beyond, not Beyond the Humidor, that's the other podcast. We here at Best Care Anywhere, legally do not condone any breaking of the law. However, if you would like to be like everyone's favorite company clerk, Corporal Klinger, and or Radar O'Reilly, and creatively acquire seasons of MASH, we will not judge you. How big of a flash drive are they going to need, Jaski?
For anyone who wants to go and dip their toes in the 7 seas, your boat should be roughly 256 gigabytes of capacity for your little boat. That should do you. Yeah.
Cue the Pirates of the Caribbean music right about now.
I, for one, am
let's cue
shocked
that
and
up.
appalled. I would never break any law. I am just the goodest boy. I have never done
Yes, do
anything
not do that.
wrong.
Absolutely do not go to certain websites and do not ensure that you have roughly 250 to 300 gigabytes of drive space available for the 11 seasons of MASH. You should legally acquire these episodes. We do not condone illegal activity. All right, are we done recording? Okay, cool.
So
In all
once we get the
seriousness,
movie still up?
yeah. So go follow along. If you wish to give us your thoughts, opinions, and questions, I do want to read thoughts, opinions, and questions out on the show. And in fact, we do have one here. I meant to bring it up earlier when we were talking about how we saw MASH, and I completely forgot because I will start talking about a topic and not stop unless I'm physically hit with objects.
Yes,
on
we're
the
familiar with podcasts.
So I asked on our various social medias that I will plug here in a minute. If you have seen MASH, what do you love about it? What got you into it? And if you haven't seen MASH, what intrigues you about it? Why are you interested in watching it? And we got a response from Kate Makes Stuff on Instagram. She says her first college roommate shared it with her. She thought it was okay. Then during a serious period of depression, I put it on and it somehow was the only TV I could watch without feeling worse. I'm feeling better now and still obsessed. When I met someone my age, 22 at the time, that not only knew about it but also liked watching it, I knew I had to snatch him up. We've been married together 8 years now and still love watching MASH together, which just warms my cold dead heart in ways I can't describe.
Nice
So,
and
yeah.
warm and slightly fuzzy on the inside.
Slightly
like mold,
fuzz. Just
but wholesome.
oh no.
You might want to get that
Wholesome
checked out.
mold. Oh, God. So Kate Makes Stuff, congratulations. You're the first person we've read comments from on the podcast. A gift will be sent to you in 5 to 28 business days. Maybe. No, I'm kidding. There won't be. The MASH podcast does not.
That's a joke.
For legal purposes, that's a joke. So follow along. We are on almost every form of social media that matters. Instagram. Yeah, and some that don't. Don't worry about it. At BestCare4077 on Twitter and Instagram. There is both a YouTube page and a fan group page on Facebook.
Ooh.
If you're more of a Facebook person. If you're not into any form of social media, but you at least have an email, you can email us at the email that I've totally forgotten what it is all of a sudden.
Insert here, podcast editor.
Insert here, podcast editor. Yes, it is bestcareanywherepod@gmail.com. So if you have thoughts, opinions, you want to tell us about how you first came to find MASH, you have questions for us, the next episode of the podcast will be 2 weeks from when you're listening to it now, and we will be discussing Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot. So do your homework, watch that. Submit your ratings out of 5 for that episode, and we will tally them up, and we will let you guys know as we go through the season kind of what episodes are popular, what episodes aren't, and give us your reasons. You can give it 5 out of 5 because Hawkeye is in it and you had a crush on him. You can give it 1 out of 5 because Frank Burns is in it and you hate him. You can give it you can rate it based on its comedy. You can rate it based on its seriousness. However you want to rate it, just give us your out of 5. We're going to tally it up. The averages will average out so we can kind of see where the good and bad points of the show are. Other than that, that's all I got. Any other comments from you two?
Questions, comments, concerns, criticisms?
Concerns, many.
Sonatas?
But none that bear repeating.
Alrighty.
Well, I have a 32-page poem I'd like to read.
Jesus Christ. All right. Thank you guys for listening. If anyone actually sends us a 32-page poem, I will read it.
If anyone does, I would love to read part of it.
We'll just make that a bonus episode. We'll just put music on and we will just do a dramatic reading.
We could release the formerly unknown first attempt at our podcast for some bonus.
No, we are not.
Aw.
All right. On that note, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you in the next one. Have a great day. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Toodaloo.
The time has come for us to say sayonara.